When they hire the right team, that's when they make the money and that's when they're successful. But some reason in the property management industry or even in entrepreneurs that are starting their companies, they get fixated that I made $100,000 or I made 50,000, so I'm doing well. If I hire someone, then I'm going to make less. That's not the case. If you hire someone for a short period of time, your income will go down. But guess what? You just freed up your time to spend time on bringing on new clients until you can hire someone else to do that. So you actually level up and make money when you develop your team and hire the right people.
Welcome to the Property Management Success Podcast, where we interview leaders in the industry to uncover the secrets to profitability, efficiency, and achieving true freedom, whether it's your time, money, or lifestyle. I'm your host, Tony Cline, and I'm here to help you build a wildly successful property management business. Let's get to it. Hey, welcome everybody. I am here today with Tiffany Rosenbaum and with the Rosenbaum Realty Group. We're going to be talking a little bit about where she came from, the company she's built, and what it took for her to get there. So welcome, Tiffany.
Thank you so much for having me on, Tony. It's exciting to be with you because you're a legend in the industry. So I appreciate you having me on. But where I came from was I started my companies out of desperation. My husband and I were in college and he really wanted to start a company up. And so we moved to Arizona, starting a company, and it didn't go as planned. It was one of those savvy student cards where it's a discount card and no money was coming in. And it was a struggle. Like, we had no heat in our home. It was 45 degrees in our home. We had no food in the fridge. We were on food storage, and I walked into my kitchen one morning, one afternoon, and I saw my 3-month-old baby and I just started to cry because I felt like a failure, like we couldn't afford anything. And I remember holding him and just going, I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to figure this out. And my parents had come in town because they were worried about me because I wasn't talking. Because at that time I didn't know what to do. So I didn't talk because I felt like a failure. And then they came into town and they go, what's going on? And they opened my fridge and go, oh, you have no food. And so they went to the market real quick, grabbed some food. But my dad was always big into figuring out a way to have money work for you. And so he turned to me and said, Tiff, you need to figure out how to get into real estate. And I go, wait, what? Are you kidding me? I can't even afford food in my fridge and you want me to get into real estate? I didn't say this, but I struggled. And then I had someone that started talking about real estate. And I was a sponge and I started to invest in real estate, found someone to actually loan to me, which to this day, I still wonder why they did it, but I did it and I always paid my bills and got into real estate and then realized there was a company that could be brought on, I could grow by property management. And so that's how we started our first company. And out of desperation, learned a lot of lessons, but that's where I started off at.
All right. So how long ago was that?
That was 2009. So if anybody understands, that was when the market had crashed. And that's why the first company didn't get off. But also I didn't know what I was doing. But so that's when we started. It was in 2009. Really 2012 is when we started the company. But 2009 is when we started investing and getting into real estate.
Okay. So 2012-ish is when you started building out the property management side.
Yes.
And so who was that in the beginning? Was it just you and your husband?
It was just us. Yeah. Actually, what was interesting, our first client, we had this property and we were learning all the ropes of property management. We had this property and right next to it, we had another property it looked like it was vacant. It looked like someone had walked off on, and we're like, what's going on? So we found the owner actually on Facebook and messaged him and was like, hey, can we just put a for rent sign out in front of your home? I mean, out in front of this fourplex, because it's doing us damage. We just want to help you out. And he was like, yeah, sure. So we started getting calls on his units and said, hey, do you mind if we rent some of your units out so ours does better? And he was like, yeah, sure. And so we did that. And then we didn't realize he had like 50 other units. And so all of a sudden we did this and he's like, hey, do you mind managing our properties? And we're like, yeah, we need to make sure we have a company. So we set up a company and we started rolling with it, but we didn't know what we were doing at all. But that's when we started it. Yes.
It's a cool story. So 2012, just trying to figure out how to get your own properties rented, stumbling into this, figuring out you could grow. So share with us now, where are you now? What type of business do you have? What's your enterprise look like? How many people? Just so we can get, because a lot of people, I think they struggle with seeing what that potential is. Because a lot of people, they get into property management, they get to that 80 or 100 door level, and then they plateau. There's too much work to do on their own, but they don't have enough cash flow or vision to be able to figure out how to bring on other people to help. So you went from where you were with just the two of you to where are you now?
Well, real quick, before I answer that question, you said something that I am very passionate about. I think most, especially in the property management industry, we get in, we put a rope around our neck and we hang ourselves because we actually put ourselves in a job. That's exactly what we do. And then the owner, when they get that job, they're like, oh, I do this perfect. So when they hire someone, they actually like literally hang themselves because they want it done exactly how they do it. And no individual is going to do it exactly how you do it because they have their own personality. You just need processes and procedures. And I made all those mistakes. But right now I own 4 companies. I'm out of the business completely. I do not do day-to-day. I look at numbers. But I had to realize that I had to get out of the day-to-day and get my nose out of where it didn't belong. But I run 4 companies, a long-term property management company, which is at about 550 units. I run a maintenance company and remodeling company that stands on its own. And then I also run a midterm to short-term rental business. And then I also run a gym. So a few different items, but I love building companies, but it took me a long time to realize that I had to stop hanging myself. And that's what I really think companies do. And as I had a chance to talk to Tony Robbins and a man out of Texas that owns multiple companies, I was asking them, I said, what's your main issue? When you build all these companies that are worth billions of dollars, what's your main issue? And they said, human resources, building my team. And I was like, if the biggest companies say that's their main issue and they put so much effort into it, that's what we have to look at and go, okay, that needs to be my number one priority. Because when your team's right, guess what? Your sales runs good. Your marketing runs good. Your finances run good. Yeah, I mean, your operations runs. And so building the team is like the number one thing that has to be looked at. And as owners, we have to get out of the day-to-day for that actually to happen.
Yeah. So building that team and taking yourself out. I talk a lot about business owners need to be the least important people in the day-to-day operations of their business. But as you mentioned, that's scary for a lot of people because you're so used to doing it your way that anything less than that seems like a failure. But unfortunately, the more you're involved, like you said, you've just created a hopefully high paying job that you can't quit. So, if you're going to have a job, it should be high paying, but you shouldn't have a job as the business owner. You should be trying to figure out in every place, where can I replace myself? So how did you start making that transition from doing it all to letting go and trusting and empowering other people?
Well, let's think about this. There's 4 pillars in any business. There's marketing, sales, there's finance, there's operations, and human resources. And when we put ourselves in a job, most entrepreneurs think they're better than they are, to be honest. And they're like, oh, I can do all this. But not one person does all those jobs great. And when I started, we were in a little 10 by 10 office in my home. And I had an individual come in and I hired him and I had employees come into my house. One of the most horrible decisions I made. But then I would listen to the phone calls because I could hear everything and I was nosy because I wanted to make sure that everything was running right. And then she'd get off the phone call and I'm like, you need to do it better like this. And it was like, I destroyed the relationship and I destroyed everything that I was trying to create because then I was micromanaging. Yeah. And it took me a while. It probably took me longer than it should have to realize that, okay, I need processes and procedures. And I have to, every time I have a job, I have to step back and I have to go, okay, who do I need to hire? And what's interesting, as I've talked to multiple business owners, they don't make much when they're trying to do everything. When they hire the right team, that's when they make the money. Mm-hmm. And that's when they're successful. But some reason in the property management industry, or even in entrepreneurs that are starting their companies, they get fixated that, oh, I made $100,000, or I made 50,000, so I'm doing well. If I hire someone, then I'm going to make less. That's not the case. If you hire someone for a short period of time, yes, your income will go down, but guess what? You just freed up your time to spend time on bringing on new clients until you can hire someone else to do that. So you actually level up and make money when you develop your team and hire the right people.
Yep. Okay, so let's give them the roadmap. Let's circle back around. So let's talk about the property management, the long-term property management business specifically. Okay. You can share about some of the others, but how did you go from the two of you to now 12 years or so later, building out this team, 550 doors? And so what's the size of your team look like now? And how did you start transitioning over into bringing on people that you could trust to take on some of that responsibility from you?
That was a very difficult thing for me. As an entrepreneur, as my mindset, I had to level up myself and work on myself. But I hired and I fired. I hired and they quit. And because I hired off the wrong thing, like I know a lot of people will talk about, hey, I just need an assistant. That's not what you need. Really, you need a specialist in a certain thing and hire that specialist to do the job. And so, to be honest, I made the wrong decision for years, hired the wrong people, fired the wrong people, hired the right people, but fired them because they didn't have the training. So I put them in the wrong seats. And I remember my worst hire. It was a person in accounting. And it was horrible. I fired that situation, and I could tell that story because it was horrible. But finally, I realized when I set up my board, I did certain things to make sure I had someone to hold me accountable. And I realized, okay, I need to hire, I need to train, and I need a team behind me to do things. So I started to hire people that had more experience. A lot of times we hear, oh, hire someone that doesn't have experience and train them. For me, I found that was not a good fit. For me, it was like, I need someone that has experience, and then they can have my processes and they can build on it. And go ahead.
I feel like there's two ways that people look at hiring when they try to grow. And so the way I've heard it presented is there's the genius with many assistants, or there's the business owner that's the conductor that conducts an orchestra full of masterful musicians or masterful people. And I think the reason why a lot of people choose to be the genius with a lot of assistants, I think it goes back to ego. It's really more tied to, if I bring in somebody that knows more than me, they're gonna discover that I don't have it all figured out, and that's going to expose some weaknesses, and it's going to make me lose control of the business. And that couldn't be further from the truth. If you bring in somebody that is better than you in specific aspects of your business, that's where all of the growth comes from. And you get out of their way. You set the parameters of what you expect as far as results, but you get out of their way and let them help build that part of the business where you just don't have that skill set.
I love that. And I took it from, if you've read Amazon's book, Jeff Bezos, and how Amazon grew, Walmart and Amazon actually have a big tie. Because when Amazon came into the market, what did they do? They went over to Walmart, post all their executives, brought them over because why? Because they knew that they built Walmart already. If they built Walmart, they could come over and build Amazon. So if you take from the greats, they always go find the top talent. And that's what I started to do and realize you can find top talent around the world. It doesn't have to be in your state. You can find them around the world. And that's what I did. And so that's what changed. And really listen to my team. I think the way you said, our ego gets in the way and we're not the best at everything. Hire the people that are the best at everything. And that's how you level up your team.
Yep. Okay. So as you're adding these people on, how do you mention having the right people, right seats? How do you go about doing that and making sure that somebody that you hire that has a lot of potential, or at least that you think they have potential during the interview process, how do you actually go about ensuring that they do have potential and that you are utilizing that potential in a way that provides growth for your company, but also growth for that individual? How do you go about doing that?
So I think this is another big downfall in our industry. It comes to the onboarding and training. If you've read the book, Starbucks Experience, they spend more money in their training and onboarding than in their marketing. And I took that book and I go, if I train, it becomes a job for me. So what I did, we call them the SWAT team. It's my training, culture, process architect, and audit team and data analysis team. So they audit everything in all of my companies. They train on onboarding, make sure people know what the company is, what their vision is, what our vision is, what's our mission statement, our core values. And then they come into the training. And it's not a perfect system. We're still working on it because in business, you're always working and getting things better. But that has completely changed our companies. And I didn't want a job. I needed to find someone. And they're better at it because they're high C individuals. And I'm a D. So I'm just going to rampage everything. It just is what it is when you talk about the DISC profile. But I hired this team so that they could oversee it. And then it runs a lot smoother to have someone else than have me do it.
So you mentioned the DISC profile. And I know there are multiple different, whether you call them personality tests or assessments. There's multiples out there. You mentioned the D. So are you guys on the DISC? Do you use the DISC assessments?
Yes, we do the DISC profiling and assessment and the emotional side of it. So I have a recruiter and they send the emotional assessment of it and the DISC profile. And I just got done again having my entire company do it because you have new individuals and you want to put them on a wheel and then you can see how people interact with each other and how they work together. And I've realized I'm a high D. I better not have a high D in a very big another position. It needs to be a high C because then they can bring me in a little bit if we're in our level up meetings, and then they can say, "Hey, do you want it done right or do you want it done fast?" And then we can get a plan together to do it right and implement what we want to implement.
So, for those of listeners that aren't familiar with what DISC profiling is, can you share just a little bit about that and how it brings benefit to the company?
Yes. And I thought it was a waste of money at first, to be honest. And so I was like, oh, I don't need to do this. Not a big deal. But then I realized by going through it with my recruiter, it was huge. The DISC profile tells you the behaviors behind someone. How do they interact? How do they function? What are their drivers? Now, I'm a high D and high I. So a high D is like, man, it has to be done now. It has to be done this way. And a high I likes to interact with people. But the high D and I's aren't the best organization, or they're not going to go in and just look at numbers all day. It's not going to work. If you have a high D in accounting, you're going to have a lot of mistakes. So the high D, I is your influential person. Your S is steady. A lot of times, in your C is your organized person like no other. So I find that the C's work really well with me to make sure that we get to a really good solution on things.
Do you have, and I know I'm putting you on the spot here, but for people that are interested in using that sort of test, do you have a resource that you recommend for people to be able to utilize that test?
Yes. Now you can get free ones online. I don't recommend them. They don't give you all the information. I would find a recruiter that has it. I have not paid for the DISC profile myself because I have a recruiter recruit for me for all my companies. And so she allows me to have access to it. Her name's Kyla. She's amazing. If anybody messages me, I'm willing to give you her information. But the DISC profile is very important. If you hire off of it, I would say you have more success on putting the right person in the right seat.
Okay. Let's kind of bring this full circle. So we started with just the two of you. You've grown now over the 12 years. You've grown from not having a business, putting together a business, then growing that and having a short-term business shoot off of that, a maintenance business shoot off of that. And just as a side note, I love the fact that you've got the gym piece because I think so many people, and we're not going to dive deep into this because I want to stay focused on where we're headed. But so many people don't take care of themselves from a health standpoint, whether it's physical or mental. And we do all of this effort to build a business to generate money. And then we spend all that money to get back the health because we didn't take care of ourselves. And so I really, I think that's great that you've now leaned into that as well.
We could have a whole conversation about mindset, but yeah.
Yeah. So let's kind of bring that. So we've now grown 550 doors. About how big is that team?
With all of our companies, it's about 30 individuals. So that's with all of I encompassed all of them. I'd have to look at my Power BI to figure out the exact number on each one. But yeah. I run heavy. I'm not a lean company because I'm not in day-to-day at all. I do not work inside my companies. I only work on them.
Yeah. So I'm curious. So you had mentioned, and where I was going with it is that you use the disc profiling to put the right people in the right roles. And then early on, you had mentioned about your core values and mission and vision. And I think that's something that it's really easy in this business, particularly for people to skip, because you start off, it's just me, I'm picking up a few properties, and then I get to the point where I need to add somebody. I don't have anything documented, not policies, not processes, not vision, not core values, nothing. And I need some help. So I just hire somebody and say, well, shadow me. And you start doing some of this stuff. And then you kind of grow from there. And you never take the time to build a foundation that you can then grow off of. And so now that you're no longer in the day-to-day, I know just from other conversations with you how important your core values and the mindset and mission and vision is to the success of your company. How are you rolling that out and keeping that front and center? And then maybe if you want, talk a little bit about when you started implementing that and how did people adapt it and were they open and receptive to it?
First, I'll say about my mistakes. I think a lot of times in entrepreneurship, we might even put it together, but it's in our head and we don't vocalize it in a way to get it across correctly. And we don't repeat it enough. So it's like ingrained in our team. And that was the first mistake I made. But I would say the mission and vision, they're really important. And it's something we actually talk about on a daily basis in our huddles. We highlight people off of our mission and vision statement. We talk about our goals on an every morning basis to make sure our team it's over and over. It's not something you can say just once.
Yeah.
Not something you can just say twice. This has to be like all the time. Otherwise, it's not getting into them. And it was interesting because I did something and I was like, hey, who knows what our goal is this year? And I got these answers like this, like a few years back. And I'm like, okay, I did not say this very correctly. Then I didn't like ingrain it in my team. So I realized it had to be something every day. You had another question, but I forgot that one. Can you repeat it? Besides mission.
Yeah, well, let me make a comment on this really quick, and then I'll circle out back around. But I think just from being around other entrepreneurs, we eat, drink, sleep, drive, commute our goals, our business, our vision, and so we think that we've communicated it enough to the team where they can get it. I think if you took the approach that if I believe that if I open my mouth and talk about our goals, our mission, our vision, our core values, and I open my mouth, our team should be ready to mock me and be able to like impersonate me and say what I'm going to say. And if I don't feel like they're to the point where they're going to throw up because they've heard it so many times, then I'm probably only about 30% of the way there, because we believe that everybody knows what we know. It's a human condition. So if we know it, we just assume other people know it. And so we're only about 30% of the way there. So don't feel like you can't lean in and over communicate those goals, because I actually don't think you can over communicate it. I just don't think it's possible.
I agree with you. And I think so many times as owners, we throw up on our teams instead of asking, hey, what's our goal? Yeah. And if we don't ask them, how do we know if they truly know what it is? Because we might say it 10 times, but if they're not repeating it and they're not putting it into their lives.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So the other question that I had was, now that you have adopted this and leaned into it and you communicate it every day, at what point did you start rolling it out, and how was it accepted by the team? Because, change is weird and difficult for people. And so if you weren't doing that in the beginning and all of a sudden you start promoting it, did you have people that are like, this is just hippie voodoo type of stuff? Like, I don't really get that. Or did you feel like it's kind of weird for me to now be talking about this big dream and vision of where we're going? Like, how did you start rolling it out, and how was it accepted by the team?
I started rolling it out years ago, but I think it was never done real successfully. Like I said, I thought I said it and I thought I got it across, but it was never done really well. As I've done it more and more, the team actually accepts it, because human nature is they actually want to be successful. They actually want to do a good job. But if they don't know what expectations are, or they don't know what the goals are, how are they supposed to move towards something? How are they supposed to know what to do? And so my team, it's very well done now. But before the goals go out, or before I mention them, I actually have an operation assistant manager talk about it with me, how we roll it out. Because sometimes my goals can go, I want it done today. But that's not reality with a team. You have to go, okay, what's going to make sure their mindset stays strong? And how are we going to get this across so that they embody it? Because if they're not sold on it, then you're fighting your own team to get to the next level. So it was on onboarding. So to go back to your question, onboarding, it's talked about. Onboarding is huge. Like, hey, this is our mission. This is our goals. This is what the company is. And then through training, they continually see it. And then every morning in our huddles, we mention it. So it's like an everyday process. Plus when you say, I don't think you can do it, we probably do, but how many times do humans actually listen the first time or the second time? So, and when you say it, how we really truly feel is what you think is what you believe, and what you believe is what you become. And so that's why it's like every time you say it, then people start to think it, and then they start to believe it. And then it's like, okay, it's just embodied.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it becomes part of the culture. And you and I, just from being around each other, we know, we're both involved in many different communities. So whether it's on the health side, where there's a community there, the fitness, real estate, and each one of those organizations that we belong to, each has its own culture and own expectation. And so you have to be intentional about the culture that you're creating, because as people enter that community, they look around to see what is the acceptable culture here, what are the acceptable behaviors here. And so when you lean heavy into promoting your mission, your vision, especially the core values, people then have some guiding marks or whatever to be able to see, oh, this is how we act in this community. And so we want to make sure that we're very intentional about putting that stuff together. And like you said, communicating it, getting into that rhythm where it's just, that's what's acceptable, to the point where mediocrity, which may be acceptable in other communities they belong in, mediocrity is not acceptable in the community they belong with in our business.
I think what you said is really important. Now, I also think you need to take the DISC profile in that, because I'm a high D, like a really high D. I do have to be careful about my expectations. Like we do expect a lot, but I've had to go to my higher up level team and go, okay, this is my expectations, but then I need to go into reality. Like, because my expectations when I first started a company is like an owner should be responded to in an hour. Well, I don't know if that's really reality. Maybe if you have 100 people responding to owners, but I lessened that expectation, because I was like, okay, what is reality if they're dealing with a team, if the pod needs help, they need a little bit of time. So talking to my team about it, it did help get the KPIs and get the expectations underneath wraps. So we're all going down the same road instead of trying to fight each other, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think what you just mentioned about backing off the owner response for an hour and teaching your team the culture and also your policies. But what's the end goal? The end goal isn't to respond to the client within an hour. The end goal is to make sure that we have a satisfied client that is confident in this level of service that we're providing. And so how can we actually do that? Now, the metric may be all of our clients need to be responded to within an hour or 4 hours or whatever, but that's not the actual goal. The goal is to use that metric to make sure that we're providing the level of service that we expect and that we've properly communicated to our clients to expect as well.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think it's important in property management. A lot of times they go on defense, and I think it's important to go on offense and to train your team and realize that a lot of times when you have teams, you can go, well, that's a lot of work. Well, in reality, it's actually less work when you go on offense instead of defense. Because if you're on defense, everything gets stopped when there's an issue. But if you're on offense, then there's less issues on the back end.
Well, Tiffany, this has been a lot of fun. I appreciate you hopping on here with me. I got a closing question for you. And then we'll wrap up, give you an opportunity to talk about what you're up to now and anything that you'd like to close out with. But my closing question is, if you could go back in time and tell your younger self anything, what would that be?
If I could go back in time and tell myself anything, it's the advice that I got from our board. And it'd be like, build your team, and your team will elevate you beyond measures that you ever thought were possible.
Nice. All right. So if somebody wants to connect with you, well, first of all, I know you're doing some other stuff besides just running the property management business, the maintenance business. If there's anything you want to talk about there, I'll give you the space to do that. And then if people are interested in connecting with you, we can obviously put it in the show notes, but if there's anything specific you want to close out with that, I'll give you the final word.
Tony, thank you so much. I appreciate it. I am actually speaking at multiple events coming up, which I'm really excited about. I'm going on the speaking circuit. I'm also doing a few things for investors. I have a lot of things hitting the ground in about the next 6 weeks that is going to be amazing. I have a podcast coming out. But if anybody wants to find me, they can find me at Tiffany M. Rosenbaum on all social media platforms. It's the same across the board. And they can ask me any question. But I am helping a lot of people right now, and I'm really excited about what's about to happen in the next 6 weeks.
All right, great. Well, thanks again for joining us. And I look forward to connecting with you again in the future.
Awesome. Thank you, Tony.
Thanks for tuning in to the Property Management Success Podcast. We'll be back with another value-packed episode to help you level up your property management game. If you've got something valuable out of today's episode, please share it with a friend or colleague. And don't forget to subscribe and leave a review so you never miss out on future insights and strategies and tactics. Until next time, here's to your success.